The last rays of light faded over the horizon as the sun set on Riven City. The sunlight serves as a veil for Riven, masking its true form behind a blinding facade. Once the dim streetlights flicker to life, that's when its true face is revealed. The pale illumination uncovers what has been lurking in the shadows all day, providing safe haven for the criminals and degenerates that lay claim to this part of the city. Reece stepped forward, pushing off the rooftop flagpole he had been leaning against to watch the sunset. He'd been impatiently waiting for this moment all day. Today was the day he decided it was finally time to take action. The transition was more than a simple change from light to dark for Reece. It's as if the darkness kindled something within him. A rage that had been suppressed had now finally broken free, shattering the chains that restrained it while the sun was out. The moon was full tonight, casting a crystalline glow that exposed the last few denizens of the day, signaling that it was time for them to scurry to the relative safety of their homes. Reece closed his eyes and drew in a deep breath. He caught the faint smell of the smog from the manufacturing plants scattered throughout Lower Riven. The regulations for atmospheric pollution from factories are strict in Upper Riven, which is why they conduct all their dirty work down here, in the slums. That's why so many down here turned crime. It was easier to knock over a few helpless people struggling to make it by, than to give their lives to some corporation that treated them like cogs in a machine. Reece couldn't take on the corporations, or at least, he didn't know how to. Not yet. He didn't even know if he could truly make a difference by standing up to the various gangs that terrorized Lower Riven, keeping it in the oppressive state that it has been stuck in for far too long. He knew taking on the whole criminal underworld of Riven would require his full focus. He needed to be all the way there, physically and mentally. One slip-up, one wrong movement, reacting too slow at any one moment could be the difference between life and death for him. Reece closed his eyes again. It was go time, but he couldn't move.
Come on, man. Pull yourself together.
Hey, get off me! Leave me alone!
The panicked voice served as the spark to ignite a raging fire within Reece's heart. Adrenaline coursed through his veins and he now felt lighter than ever. Reece sprinted toward the edge of the two-story building he was on and leapt, landing gracefully on a semi-truck parked along the curb across the street from the scream. He spotted a boy emerge from the darkness of the nearby alleyway.
Come here, you little twerp!
They were all headed toward him without registering his presence.
Perfect. Now to make my entrance.
Bouncing off the truck with a force that seemingly allowed him to glide through the air, Reece landed in between the boy and his pursuers, timing the jump perfectly. The three thugs came to an abrupt halt, surprised at the sudden appearance of the figure that now stood before them. One of the thugs stepped forward.
What do we have here, boys? Looks like someone needs to be reminded that the Hellboys own this side of town. Didn't Mommy ever tell you that nothing good in this city happens after dark?
Reece let the punk talk. It allowed him time to size them up and analyze his surroundings. The one who spoke was lanky, slightly taller than Reece, but nowhere near as filled out as he was. The other two stood a few feet behind the first. Smug grins lined their faces at the opportunity of a fight. One had a crowbar, while the other absently swung a metal baseball bat in the air. All three wore matching jet-black biker jackets and ripped jeans. This wasn't one of the big syndicates that ruled over Riven, but just another low-level crew that looked to make a name for themselves in the streets that had more gangsters than cars. It was filth like this that drowned Lower Riven underneath chaos and corruption. The lanky one shrugged his shoulders and turned his head, cupping a hand around his left ear.
What? You got nothing to say, bud? Boys, show this dumbass what happens to those who cross the Hellboys.
The two enforcers stepped forward, while the leader took a step back. They moved to either side of Reece, not rushing in before they got a better look at him. The dim illumination from the flickering streetlights only gave the enforcers fleeting images of Reece. He wore a sleeveless hoodie and sweats that blended in with the shadows surrounding him. A black bandana tied around the lower half of his face obscured him in anonymity. His muscular frame caused the thugs to hesitate. Nothing too exaggerated. It allowed him the strength he needed without sacrificing his natural acrobatic ability. Suddenly, the thug on his right tossed the crowbar aside and barreled toward him, arms extended wide to tackle and pin Reece to the ground. Squatting low, he turned toward the man just as the Hellboy was about to grab him. Using his left hand to grip the punk's wrist, he then pulled the thug closer, thrusting his right palm into the man's gut, piercing through his abdominal muscles and knocking the wind right out of him. While the Hellboy was desperately gasping for breath, Reece spun and lodged his shoulder into the punk's armpit, straightening the arm before snapping it with another thrust of his palm. The man fell to his knees, then toppled forward onto the hand of his one good arm, the broken one just dangling at his side. The thug's eyes grew wide in terror, tears beginning to stream down his face, struggling to catch his breath. Without hesitation, Reece cocked his right leg back, then quickly drove it forward, connecting it with the man's jaw. The sheer force behind the blow knocked him unconscious and sent him sprawling in the direction of the boy. The boy couldn't believe his eyes. As soon as he heard something land in between him and his pursuers, he'd spun around to see what it was. He was baffled when he realized it was a person.
Who's this nutjob?
The kid thought, while he scurried to take cover behind a lone dumpster. In all of this time on the streets of Lower Riven, he had never before seen anyone brave enough, or crazy enough, to take on any of the thugs in any of the petty gangs. Even the cops steered clear of them. Riven City's police department was much more concerned about taking care of the people that lined their pockets in North Riven than risking their lives for the suffering people of the lower half. To see anyone actually take a stand against Lower Riven's oppressors shocked the boy. He ducked low behind the greasy dumpster, peering around the side to silently root for the hero, or idiot, in the sleeveless hoodie.
There can be no mercy, no remorse for the filthy degenerates that plague my city.
Reece needed to match their brutality. He needed to show the gangs that someone was willing to stand up to them. The innocent and oppressed people of Lower Riven needed someone to fight for them, to cleanse their city of the parasites that sucked the life out of the very soul of their home. Looking down at the thug that lay at his feet, Reece slowly lifted his head up to stare straight into the eyes of the other enforcer. The lanky leader was shaking behind the remaining member of his crew, both of them standing completely still, expressions of terror frozen on their faces.
Come on, man! Go get him!
Awkwardly regaining his balance after his boss shoved him forward toward the hooded figure, the second enforcer whipped his head back to face him, a look of panicked bewilderment across his face. Before the helpless thug could turn back around, Reece was already on him. In one swift motion, Reece closed the distance between him and the second Hellboy, connecting a thunderous right hook with his jaw. The punch staggered the man, allowing Reece to continue the assault with a punch to his ribcage, followed by an uppercut to his chin. This sent the man flailing backward. Dazed and barely able to stay on his feet, he raised his fists in front of him in a desperate attempt to defend himself. Reece bolted forward and grabbed the man by the collar with one hand, while stringing together 3 quick jabs to the punk's face with the other. Underneath the vivid moonlight, Reece could see blood leaking down from the Hellboy's nose, his face already bulging from the multiple blows he took. Bringing his right hand forward to join the first in an iron grip of the punk's collar, he swung him with all his might to the side, sending the unconscious man sprawling to the cold asphalt below. The leader, who had spoken so confidently just a few moments before, now struggled to find words.
Please don't hurt me!
The lanky man jerked his head side to side, looking for somewhere to run, someone to help him, some way to escape the demon that was slowly stalking toward him. He had been stumbling backwards, desperately trying to keep as much distance as he could between him and this masked freak.
You're not human!
This was all the thug leader was able to say before he felt the solid brick wall of the warehouse behind him. Terror coursed through the skinny man's veins as the figure closed the distance between them. Then, as fast and sudden as a bolt of lightning, he felt the masked man's fingers swallow up his face, violently pushing his head toward the rock-solid wall. And then he felt nothing, embracing the darkness as it quelled his fear and offered him peace.
Hey!
Reece turned, facing the boy that had just emerged from behind a dumpster several yards away. He had forgotten about him while caught up in the adrenaline rush of the confrontation. Not knowing how to handle the situation, Reece spun toward the alley that the boy had been chased out of and sprinted toward it. Catching a glimpse of the lowered ladder of a fire escape, Reece picked up speed and leapt upward. Feeling the lower half of his fingers connect with the rusted metal, he squeezed. Holding his grip, he immediately brought up his other hand to grasp the second rung of the ladder. Quickly making his way up the fire escape, he was on the roof of the 4-story building before the kid even stepped foot into the alley.
Dude, why are you running? I just want to thank you for saving me.
Reece examined the boy. He felt bad for running off on the kid, but he couldn't take any chances.
Trust no one. Everyone is after something, and too often it's at the expense of others.
This was one of the many sayings Uncle Jack made Reece memorize and live by. Thinking about him now, Reece wondered what he would have thought about his mission. He remembered the promise he made to his uncle, who lay in his hospital bed, dying from the injuries sustained in what the cops ruled a random mugging. Reece will never forget the words his uncle told him that day.
Be better than the city allows most people to be. There are good people in Lower Riven. Promise me, Reece. Promise me you'll help them break free from those who oppress them.
The man who had taken the orphaned Reece under his wing was barely able to give voice to these last words, slowly drifting into unconsciousness. Tears began welling up in Reece's eyes as he squeezed his uncle's hand even harder.
I promise.
Jack was able to form one last smile as he looked at Reece, before closing his eyes, never to wake up again.
You better watch out, kid. I'm coming for you.